Ruthie from FS Securities, a stockbroking firm on the Gold Coast in Queensland, Australia. And every Monday morning I go through what happened globally around the world and try to forecast what we may see this coming week. I'll show you how investors and traders can make money, I should say may make money on our stock market. I'll show you what is hot and what is not, and what you should hold and what you should fold. And by the way, if you enjoyed the presentation, please give us some feedback. We would appreciate it very much indeed. Overnight and over the week, we actually start with the American market. As you can see here, the Dow Jones Industrial Average was slightly down last week. However, when we combine the 2 weeks together, the market was up by 139 points or 0.5%. The Nasdaq Technology Index was up 1.6% over the last 2 weeks. However, last week was actually slightly down. The S&P 500 index, that's the broader index, again over the last 2 weeks was up by 1.2%. The US dollar, as you can see here, has actually been down the last 2 weeks, slightly down last week, and over the last 2 weeks 0.5% lower. Obviously, the Australian dollar versus the US gained some strength, and over the last 2 weeks was actually up 0.7%, with a major increase last week by 1.2%. The euro also was stronger against the US, and the British pound started to be slightly up by nearly 0.2%. Gold over the last 2 weeks was up by $3 or 0.2%. Silver was down by 2% over the last 2 weeks, and West Texas crude oil was up by nearly 6.6% last week. However, over the last 2 weeks was up by just 2%. And looking at our market, the S&P ASX 200, our market gauge, was actually down 2% last week, but because of the gain the week before, combining the 2 weeks together, was almost steady, just 2.8 points over the last 2 weeks. However, as you can see here, we had a major drop last week by 139 points. Obviously, the week before we had a major rise, so that all was wiped out last week. Our market is made up to a greater extent by two major sectors, the financial and the materials. The financials over the last 2 weeks was down 1.2%, and the material was steady over the last 2 weeks. Look at all our stocks. As you can see here, everything is red. That means last week everything went down across the top 20 companies. Looking down this column, AMP was the worst, 5.6%, followed by Newcrest Mines down 4.1%. Also we have Telstra down 4.2% and Woolworths down 3.5%. However, when we combine the 2 weeks together, the best stock was actually Rio, up 1.9%, and Telstra over the last 2 weeks was up by nearly 4%. Okay, we like to look at volume to give us some idea about how the market is trending. As you can see here on the left hand side, the daily advances over decline and also the volume. Thursday and Friday, where we can see that the advances were actually exceeding the declines, we've seen that the volume was actually lower, much lower than the first 2 days or the first 3-4 days in the week, when the market was actually dropped by 41% on Tuesday and nearly 40% on Thursday. So you can see here that the market was actually hammered overall last week. On the right hand side, we can see the weekly advances over declines. Excuse me, and we can see here over the full week the declines well in advance, well ahead of the advances. You can see here the advances was only 49% and 51% were actually the declines. So okay, looking at the mechanical system where we can actually have different strategies for the investor. the conservative trader, aggressive trader, and very aggressive trader. As you can see, for the American market, we started to go from very bullish the previous 4 weeks into a bearish trend last week for the aggressive trader and the very aggressive trader, with the exception of the Nasdaq, which will remain bullish for the investor, the long-term investor. Remember, the investor takes a long time to actually readjust the indicators, because we actually rely on the monthly indicators, and of course the monthly indicators are changing once a month. Gold, on the other hand, was slightly bullish for the very aggressive trader, and so is silver and crude oil at the same time. Looking at the Australian dollar, for the investor we have a bearish trend, and for the very aggressive trader we have a bullish indicator. Remember, the week before we had a very aggressive bearish. However, for the very aggressive trader we managed to actually turn it into a bull. Okay, looking at the chart for the Dow Jones, you can see that last week the market actually dropped quite a bit. We had a declining week. However, it actually went all the way down to 27 and managed to recover right through towards the end of the week. As you can see here, on Friday the market had a very good strong green candle with a bullish advances. As you can see later on, that actually the Dow on Friday went up by nearly 300 points. It hasn't recovered all the losses that we've seen previously. However, it's a good indication that the market on Friday was up quite extensively, and of course that will actually have a major factor on our market on Monday morning, that's today. Looking at our mechanical system, for the sectors, for the very aggressive trader we have bearish right across, with the exception of telecommunication. We are bullish at the end of the week for the aggressive trader as well as the very aggressive trader. And if you are an investor, we are very neutral, with the exception of energy. We have a bull for the investor. However, for the very aggressive trader it's bearish. Again, if you want a copy of those slides, all you have to do is call us and we'll send them to you. This is actually our chart for the ASX 200, our market gauge. You can see last week we have a very big bad red candle, and that's because on Tuesday and Wednesday we had more than 100 points declines. We've actually had all the way up to 6,885, all the way down to 6,600, and on Thursday and Friday we've seen some small recovery, and of course today we might see also a further recovery. However, we don't expect the market will go all the way back up to the highest level that we've seen earlier in the week last week. Looking at all the stocks, with the exception of Telstra, which was bullish for the aggressive trader and the very aggressive trader, and Worley, we have a bullish indicators for the conservative, aggressive and very aggressive trader, and so is TPG. Again, TPG is showing a bull indicators for the conservative as well as the aggressive and the very aggressive traders. In terms of the strong bearish, we have NAB, very strongly bearish, Westpac, very strongly bearish, and so is Suncorp. They are the three very strong indicators for the various three stocks. Okay, now in terms of volume, we like to look at the weekly volume and see any excess of volume over the weekly average. As you can see here, Caltex, because it's been taken over, had 122% above its weekly average. As you can see, the weekly average is 5.9 million transactions, and last week we've seen 5.2 million. Again, every increase in the price as well as the increase in the volume send you a very straight and very clear signal that something is happening and there is a momentum with that particular stock. Now, in terms of the bearish, we've got the two banks, Westpac and ANZ. We know about the background with behind the money laundering claims and the losses and probably the penalties that those banks will be incurring. In terms of the mid-cap, Ivy Group, 241%. It may be of some indication that there is something happening in the background. Well, obviously it requires some investigation. Select Harvest appeared right through last week, and that's showing 197% above its volume, and so is Alacer. We traded Alacer in the CFDs and we made some decent profit, and we eventually closed that position and taken the profit and ran. In the downside, G8, however, we cannot trade G8 indication on the CFD platform. Hub24 and Bigger Cheese, all these companies are showing excessive volume and declining in the price. Finally, before I close, let me tell you that as far as our CFD trading, we are sitting still on about 18% profit on our capital. We invested $4,000 and we're sitting on 18% profit at the moment. A small decline from last week. Appen has also gave us a bit of headache last week. We entered the trade in Appen, recovered a little bit, but we're still in a major loss with Appen. However, we made money on Alacer, as I indicated before, and we closed that position. Okay, finally, the disclosure. Our disclaimer before we close, everything I said today is for general advice only. We don't know your financial circumstances, so before you take any action, please consult with us or your professional advisor. And if you have any questions, by the way, all you have to do is write to us or talk to us. Again, you can write to me, George, at fssecurities.com.au, or you can call me on my mobile. I'm available 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. If you're ringing from overseas, 61, and then you don't need the 0, 61-411-259526. Happy trading and happy week.